this work all right.
Boy, I guess I should turn the phone off.
I was expecting this to go.
Who knows? Oh, I know. Yeah, that's what I said. Is that, you know, it'll ring at the worst possible moment because that's what happens every time. Okay.
Is this the, just
That's
what-
the
this
final
what- this what-
mock-up,
Is
I
this
believe.
what we got at Friday afternoon?
Right.
Just before 5.
I believe that's what's in this red line.
Okay, yeah. Cause I printed it off too, my front and back, so this is.
We'll go along with these. Yeah.
This will be maybe plan B. I wanna note that
Okay.
as being
Okay.
label that in B. Label this one plan B. This would be plan B, which is plan A with more changes. Now, this is the building
That's the plan B one from.
That's the big sentence.
Which was the same
Is the back page of that, yeah. Right.
Yeah. So that should be the first one in here. That should be the second one in here. And yeah.
Did they know that the C makes and themselves?
I believe so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So they got it from their board. Yes.
We good? All right. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Presque Industrial Council Membership Special Meeting of February 6, 2024. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody, for coming this evening to this special meeting. We have 6 out of 7 councilors present, plus Louis, our interim city manager, and Tom Powers, our executive director, Presque Industrial Council. So those will be the people that comprise the membership of this for this evening. First item of our agenda is a call to order and establish a quorum, which we have. And the second is to review the Presque Industrial Council bylaws. So we will begin by anybody that would like to comment on where we are to date. Feel free to start if you want. Go ahead.
Would you like me to start with?
Sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I've got a prepared statement. I guess it'd be easier to stay on track if I just kind of stuck and read to that. The public needs to understand the issues surrounding the Presque Industrial Council and what has led to this bylaw discussion this evening. The Presque Industrial Council was created in 1961 by the Presque City Council. The original board consisted of 9 persons. They were from the business and legal community in Presque. They were empowered to make decisions to develop the industrial park, to buy and sell land and items as needed, and they were only to deal with the city of Presque for financial deals, and the approval of all items would be ratified by the city council. This is a copy of that original document of the corporation of the Presque Industrial Council. And interestingly enough, if you read the names, they were kind of the who's who of 1961 in business in Presque, and so they were off to a great start from many different avenues in the community. I've also made available, and if anyone hasn't picked anything up, there's programs for the meeting, as well as other handouts that are over on the far table. But just to kind of give some definition of where we're at, this is kind of a flow chart of the organization. So the city council, which in this form that we are tonight is the Presque Industrial Council membership, which in addition to the 7 councilors is the executive director, Tom, and our city manager, and at this point is Louis Cousins, our interim manager. The next level of I guess organizational of the group is the Presque Industrial Board of Directors, of which most, I think everyone is here this evening. And then reporting to them is the Presque Industrial Council Executive Director, and then the Executive Assistant. So just to kind of give people a sense of how the organization is structured, that kind of gives you a little sense of that. The flow chart are the responsibilities of what different levels of the flow chart are empowered to do. The Presque Industrial Council membership and the City Council approve the land transactions, loans and budget and bylaws of the organization. The Presque Industrial Board of Directors hire the director. They recommend policy. They work on lease and sales and details of such things. Approve operational requests from the executive director, and then the Presque executive director enacts the policy of the board, manages the staff, meets with the tenants, developers, and is responsible for daily operations. So just to kind of give you a sense again of how those things work. So let's kind of go from there. During the past 63 years, there has been a dynamic, as you can see from the organizational chart, of this dynamic of big brother and little brother, and to work in consort to build the industrial park. At no time did any disagreement rise to the level of this current discussion. The reason this likely happened is a healthy respect on both sides and trust, both of which were tarnished in the last month. The long-held design of the City Council having a right to oversee the actions of the board by the founding documents was placed in limbo by a bylaw written in haste in 2021. The bylaw was not presented in its full form, but was asked to be adopted by the board of the PIIC membership. Again, the board can make suggestions, but it is not empowered to vote and make changes on the bylaws. So with the history of trust with the City Council, including myself, we granted this wish and voted for the new language. This, in hindsight, was a mistake, and it was a very poor decision. Changes of this sort are generally proposed at one meeting, and then we hold them over for a month and then vote at the following meeting after we've had time to vet them. This gives time for the public, the legal counsel, the City Council, and staff to all test the language and make sure it does what it's intended to do and not create a new or more complicated issue. In this case, the language did exactly that. It was proposed to stop the potential appointment of one man to the Presque Industrial Council under the guise of a change to protect business by way of eliminating conflict of interest. On the surface, the ideals of this are wonderful. The concept, it is good. The wording was written to be somewhat vague so as to encompass several factors. Had we done our month-long look at the language, it would have likely been tested to see if it caused any of these unintended consequences. The two things that immediately come to view are the prohibition of a city councilor from sitting on the board unless they fit the narrow definition that is given. To go back, the council at the administrative level votes on financial deals, sales, and all budget items for the Presque Industrial Council. So to have a rule that the people who control your executive functions cannot sit on your board as a representative is not good policy, nor does it make any sense. Why would the executive board of General Motors be precluded from sitting on a lower company board? Secondly, the bylaw states that shareholders with no qualifications of them, i.e. majority, controlling, nothing, or owners of the property on the park would be excluded. This again, in a deeper dive, makes no sense and holds no water and can't pass a straight face test. So let's just kind of review what the difference between an owner and a tenant or a leasee are. So an owner owns their land and the building. They do not have any legal contract with the Presque Industrial Council. They do not have any annual agreements. They do not have any property agreements that bind usage or control within their property. They pay taxes to the city as any property owner in the city would. They deal directly with the code department for development on their site, not with the Presque Industrial Council. That, opposed to a tenant or leaseholder, they do not own their lands or building. They do have a legal contract with the Presque Industrial Council. They do have annual agreements. They do have property agreements that bind usage or control. They do not pay taxes to the city. They pay lease fees to the Presque Industrial Council. They deal directly with the Presque Industrial first for any development, not the city code department. So there is a vast difference between an owner and a tenant in regards to the park. Okay. An owner on a property in any location in Presque holds no allegiance to their neighbor or an entity unless there is some kind of homeowner agreement or an agreement that may exist to bind them to the organization or the area in which they're located. In this case, owners, there is no such agreement for that situation. Business owners who have purchased land in the area of the park at that moment sever their ties to the Presque Industrial Council. They have no further business or obligation to the Presque Industrial Council. So to ban a business owner for where the business is located is not only wrong, but it's very capricious. Again, the bylaws were not vetted correctly, and this language should have been challenged in 2021, and we should have removed that at the time. Where the language did have merit was in the management of a potential board member who has a financial interest in the park by lease or license. These ongoing agreements are very likely a place for conflict to occur and should have some sort of check and balance. It is fully warranted that anyone on the board would not have control over the cost of a lease or a license that they personally benefit from. This is why the fox does not guard the henhouse. To get the understanding of these issues, we initiated with both boards a meeting. We felt that it was in the best interest of all concerned to sit and discuss the merits of how to best write the language. The Presque Industrial Council Board refused to meet, citing the style of the meeting, and we would rather meet in the future, which brings us to today. We left our last discussion with the understanding that we would both submit proposed language to discuss. To this point, and this was written 7 days prior to the meeting, we had not seen the ideas from the Presque Industrial Council, but had some verbal statements and gave us some direction. An email from Director Bemis that gave an example of airport bylaws, which we have incorporated almost verbatim in our proposal. This language does not prevent owners from serving, but only leaseholders and license holders. These ideas are fine to discuss, but they do not, in my opinion, solve the issue of the authority granted in the original founding documents of the organization, giving power over the management to the City Council acting as the Presque Industrial Council Membership Board. It also does not give any cogent reason why an independent owner cannot serve on the Presque Industrial Council Board. So for me, to say this process was kind of frustrating and frankly unproductive is a fairly fair assessment. So to sum up things that we hope to accomplish with our new language, we, the Presque Industrial Council Membership Board, propose to keep and strengthen the language on leaseholders and license holders on the park from being on the board. We will clear up confusion on the City Council's role in oversight. We will add language that spells out conflict of interest and duties to report any potential issues to the Presque Industrial Council Board. With these clarifications, I think we can satisfy the need to be ethical, honest, provide good service to the citizens of Presque, and to provide peace of mind that checks and balances exist in a meaningful way to protect the business of the citizens. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for your understanding.
Chair would recognize any other comments of council. Anybody else have anything they would like to say? At this point, would anything, Tom?
Yes, I would, thank you. Recognize that.
Absolutely.
Well, at this time, being a member of the membership board.
Wish we had we have a seat for you. Jump in.
No, that's fine. I'm okay where I am, but thank you. Well scripted. Very good, Mr. Green. There'd be a few things that I personally won't voice because I think it's my role to actually stay as neutral as possible. And I do realize that you did in your statement say that was your opinion on most of that. Some of it I would take a little, may not have been totally vetted, but that's all right. If it's okay with the membership group, I would like to be able to defer to a few of the members from the Presque Industrial Council at this time,
By
if
all
it's all right.
means. Sure.
Is there someone from the council that would like to go first in this matter? I'd like to recognize Margot Dyer. Margot is a board member.
Welcome, Margot.
Thank you. And I am Margot Dyer. I serve on the Presque Industrial Council as a representative of the Chamber of Commerce. Before becoming a member of the Presque Industrial Council, I did review the bylaws. I was not part of the modification of the bylaws discussion in 2021. I came on the board in 2022, and I fit the narrow definition of being a member of the Presque Industrial Council. So after reviewing the bylaws, I happily accepted the ability to be appointed to that board. I am in agreement with the bylaws as they were written. I will share with you that I have served with the board for 2 years, and I can assure you that nothing is done in haste. We agree to disagree, but to say that this was passed in haste, I will go down saying that what I know of the board right now, this was not done in haste. So that's pretty much all I have to say. I am supportive of the way that they were written, and I guess that's it.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Just one thing about Margot's comments, and I think Craig's comments, that we didn't feel that the board of directors did something in haste. It was the city council that accepted the motion and without a lot of review that evening and voted on it. So I'll make that. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Your group spent time on deciding on what they would propose to us. We didn't hold it over as we normally do with most of our actions, and we routinely put things ahead 1 month for review to give comment.
citizen comments, legal comments, or staff comments, or whatever it may be. So that was our fault. So I don't mean to say that you guys made a snap decision and said, here, do this. We didn't do our normal process. That was our problem.
Mr. Director?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'll ask if there's a second member of our board, and at this time looks like Mr. Derek Smith, who is also a member of the PIIC board.
Welcome, Mr. Director.
Good evening, everyone. There's a couple of points I want to hit on. First, in the language as proposed by the City Council, which adopts most of the language that we had agreed to previously, there's still no carve-out for a lessee who is a member of City Council. You say that as being a member of City Council, it should not matter. I respectfully disagree, which comes to my second point. The perception of a conflict of interest, to me, is what we are trying to avoid. We hold a trust with the community, a trust with our tenants, our future tenants, that we are above board on all fronts. If they even get a whiff of a conflict of interest, that could be substantial. It could sully deals. It could make things not happen with the expediency which they've happened in the past. I beg you to think of that. Also think of, let's not talk about anybody that's in the room today. Let us think of the future. This is not an aspersion against anyone who's been elected on this council, but some people have been elected in the past, no contest. Let's say someone who's not a great person gets that 70-something signatures. They get elected to this council. They happen to be a tenant or owner on the park. They don't have the ethics that the people in this room have.
Mm-hmm.
So this is also a bulwark against that future. So I would hope that we would adopt strong as language as we can to protect the integrity and perceived integrity of this organization, which has been, to me, a shining star in this community.
Thank you.
I'll have to learn to sit in the front row next time.
You have a seat open here, buddy.
With that, I would also ask one of the other directors, and I believe it'll be Mr. Hughes that will come up. So Ray Hughes, one of the board of directors.
Welcome, Director Hughes.
Yes, members of the membership of the Presque Industrial Council. I'm Ray Hughes. I currently serve as the Secretary Treasurer. I've been a director for something like 12 years. And I provided you with comments previously by email. I won't read those. I'm assuming you all have received those. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have had with those, but I would like to make a couple of points. I would agree with Margot that I recognize, Mr. Chairman and Craig, that you feel maybe the City Council acted in haste, but I would point out that 2 members of the City Council did sit on the Presque Industrial Council Board of Directors for the 3 months that we discussed this, so at least a portion of the City Council was fully informed of what we were contemplating or what we felt might be an issue that should be addressed. I would also address the fact that you indicated, Craig, that you would hope to have a discussion. We were more than willing to have a discussion. It's just we weren't willing to have it in an executive session. It's a public policy. We were willing to have the discussion in public. And apparently you were not. So that's where we fell down, not having the discussion. And I don't know which version of the bylaws you're contemplating. I've seen a version that essentially lifts the section from the Airport Advisory Committee as being what would cause a conflict. I've seen the Industrial Council Board of Directors version, and I've seen one, I think the most recent one, the final one, that basically incorporates, by and large, what the Industrial Council has recommended. So I don't know which one's gonna be voted on tonight. I'm assuming it's the latter one, the most recent one. And all I would say to that, as I said in my comments, is that I do believe that there is a conflict and a situation where uncomfortable situations can arise which should be avoided, which is why we chose 2.5 years ago to start talking about putting this in the bylaws. The way it's written, or the last version I saw, limits that simply to, apparently recognizes that that is a conflict, spells out what the conflict is, but then limits that to just the directors at large. And I am at a loss to see why someone who is a member of an organization, such as the Chamber of Commerce or any other organization, excludes that conflict. And I'm at a loss as why someone who is elected as a public official excludes that conflict. If the conflict is there, whether you belong to an organization, whether you belong to the Boy Scouts or whoever you belong to, the conflict's there. And I think it should apply to all classes of directors. That's my comments. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes.
Okay. Well, at this time, the president of the Presque Industrial Council, which is Mr. Scott Norton, is going to make his way up here after knee surgery. So if you'll give him a moment, he'll make his way up and read what his comments may be. And thank you for allowing us at this time to do so.
No, take your time. We don't want to set back therapy any longer than it has to here.
Thank you all. What they tell me.
Welcome,
It was a
Mr. President.
success. I have a new knee, so it doesn't feel new and doesn't look new. But they said there's something new in there. This is certainly a different venue for me. I'm not used to this. Serving over 20 years on the Presque Industrial Council, I don't get up in front of the public. I don't attend public meetings that often. Everything that we do is directed off the park and for the park. In my over 20 years, many of those have been served as president, and been happy to do so. It's a great, very diverse board. We get a lot done in a short period of time. We meet once a month, and our goal is to get everything done within 2-3 hours time, and we do. Through the executive director, Tom and Ruth, co-director, previously Larry Clark. They've all been great to work with and very productive. And to my knowledge, a lot of praise from the city of Presque, and acknowledgements, and we appreciate that, and we appreciate the support of the city council, as well as the city itself. My comments are going to be brief. A lot of what the previous directors have said before me, especially with Ray's comments about singling out directors at large, it doesn't seem right to me that that it would pertain to 3 individuals or director at large. That's very vague, and it's very unsupportive of what we do there. This roots at conflict of interest, is why the bylaw came up. This Presque Industrial Council was formed many, many years ago. There's never been any type of conflict over what was clear and who was going to be a director. Those things were always talked about. They're always worked out ahead of time. It was not a public meeting. It wasn't necessary. People knew who was going to be on the board, or suggested somebody. That's always the way it worked, and we thought that was going to continue until this arose. I wish it didn't come to this. Obviously, this is not the way that we conduct business, nor do we want to conduct business this way. A lot of great people. I don't have any problem with anybody on the board, anybody on the city council. I don't have any conflicts that I know of, okay? That's me saying this, you guys might, but I don't. So as far as who can be on the board and who can't be on the board, 2 years ago, the reason that the bylaws came up was an amendment to the bylaws was strictly because of a conflict of interest that could arise, and that we need to address that issue. We need to have it in writing. And maybe it was a little vague when people start picking it apart, saying shareholders, if you own stock in something, that's not what it was meant for. It was meant to include closely held tenants, owners on the park, period. That's what it was for. An obvious conflict of interest could arise by an owner, tenant on the park, being on the board, and so forth. So for that reason and that reason alone, that's why the bylaw was written that way. I stand behind it. It needs to be there, and hopefully that you'll consider that original, going back to that 2022 bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I got two of them, don't I?
All right, so if you've noticed that all the current board members have showed up tonight, and there's one remaining, so that would be Mr. Frank Bemis, and I'll ask if he has a few words, and that should concur our evening.
Welcome, Mr. Director.
Thank you. Usually, I like a lot of press. It helps with business. I pay money to be on WAGM. You'll see me on there once in a while. When it comes to the Presque Industrial Council, I don't know how many people in this city would know that I'm on it. Why is that? Because everything we do at the Presque Industrial Council is private. It is a separate entity from the city. I'll wait in case there's a Mr. Mr.
Tap.
Cousins distracting.
Tap it. You're gone. You're good?
You all set, Louis? Yeah. Okay.
I think we went off for a bit.
Whatever. What we do is private. You enjoy different rules when it comes to the Presque Industrial Council, those meetings, because you only have 2 counselors, city councilors, on the directorship. As you know, when you have more than 2, it becomes a public meeting, and we have to be here with any citizen who wishes to show up. The press can review it, etc. That isn't the case when it comes to the Presque Industrial Council. And we're carrying out the needs of this city as it relates to the Presque Industrial Park, as it relates to other things on a project basis in the city. And it calls us to a bit of a higher standard because there's not going to be a review of the public of what any individual director had to say that day. We're accountable to ourselves, we're accountable to the board, we're accountable to you, the membership. And again, if I may use first names, I've dealt with every single one of you in some capacity or other. Craig, I disagree with many of your points, and I'll address some of them. It's not a matter of disrespect, and it's not a matter of not understanding that you're the elected body, and I'm not part of an elected body right now. I understand all that. However, it is my duty to tell you what I think is right, and to give you the logic of it, and to let you know what it is, and I'm going to do that. So, the city the industrial park directors did not refuse to meet with you. I called into question whether or not that was a public meeting. We're here discussing the policy of the city of Presque, and I still maintain that it's right to discuss policy in a public setting, not through an executive session. So it's not a refusal, it's just merely following the law. I completely disagree that our motives were in any way anything but to make sure that you have good and fair governance of the Presque Industrial Council. I stand by, and we stand by, the intent of the original drafted section that deals with conflicts of interest, that deals with being a tenant or owner on the park, and I'll explain that a little further. It was not designed to attack one man, and there was no motives involved that were that can be called into question. So I disagree with you, Craig, in that regard. It reflected the fact that over 60-some years, there hadn't been a tenant or an owner of the park who had been on the Presque Industrial Council. And I I personally have not reviewed the records, but I've asked our staff and of course our city historian of sorts for the park, Larry Clark, about that, and he has confirmed it. The city council did, through its members, through its council members, did advise us of some concerns with the language. Our directors met right after that aborted executive session. We met on February 1st. We met for over an hour, I believe, and came up line by line with language. I hope you have the language in front of you.
We do.
Wonderful. I'm not provided as much room as I would like in the civil thing, so that's what. So what we came up with for language was to try to address some of the concerns of this council. There may still be a disagreement as to whether this language is necessary or not, but I'm going to give you what our thinking was behind it as we go through it. It's been marked up for you. It's pages 3 of 6 of the Presque Industrial Council Director's recommendation. It says that no director shall be an owner or lessee of property located within the Skyway Industrial Park. So in that, it applies to all directors. That would be at-large directors, of which there are 3, Presque Chamber of Commerce directors, of which there are 2, and Presque City Councilors, of which there are 2. The language that we've been presented by, through Mr. Courier's office, would allow 4 people with what we consider a conflict of interest to serve on the board, whereas at-large directors, such as myself, could not be tenants or owners on the park. The next criticism was that some might say that a shareholder could include someone like me that has mutual funds out there, things of that nature. I own, or I'm a member of 2 LLCs that are closely held. They're all related to my law office, and I am not a tenant or owner in the park. I am an owner of mutual funds. I have literally no idea if any of them are. They may be. It may be even likely. I do not know. But in no time was it our intent. So we've clarified that language, as you'll see. And it says of a closely held corporation, business, or other economic entity. Okay? So hopefully we've addressed that concern and taken that out of play. And then, again, located within Skyway Industrial Park. And we just, to clarify, said, this restriction shall not apply to ownership in mutual funds, retirement funds, or the holding of publicly traded stocks. This restriction shall not apply to license to use space agreements. As I'll say confessed, but disclosed one time or the other, I have a motorcycle. My motorcycle is stored at the Presque Industrial Council. My wife originally is the one who had that set up for one of her convertibles, and over time, I said, geez, mate, do you have space for the motorcycle? There was and is, and I paid the going rate for that. It is our suggestion that you not include people like me. What do we have, 200 some, 400 some? I don't remember.
There's about 120 people, 200 pieces.
Right. There used to be more, but we've had success in leasing much of that space, so short-term tenants have not had the same luck. We don't think it should apply to people that store property there. And Margot, I think, raised her hand to say she stores stuff there as well. Then there was some question of, gee, what is the Presque Industrial Park? Well, I have a pretty decent idea what it is, but let's say there are people that are concerned what that means. Great. Just so you know, I see it's in the picture above your shoulders up there. That's about half of it, maybe 2/3. There are 5 deeds that take into account the Presque Industrial Park in our view. They are the airport deed. They are the industrial deed, of which there are 2, am I mistaken? Were there 2 airport deeds or 2 industrial deeds? 2 airport deeds, excuse me. 2 airport deeds, an industrial deed. This goes way back when the federal government gave it to the city. And then we've had various swaps or purchases of land that we consider to be part of the park. So those 5 deeds define the Presque Industrial Park. So we've acknowledged that the language did require some work to take into account what the City Council recommended to us. However, it's been described as absurd, arbitrary, capricious, etc., nonsense even. It is not nonsense. It is not arbitrary. Arbitrary means that we can't figure out, we're just applying it randomly to whoever we wish. No, we're applying it to those who are owners or tenants on the park. So I thoroughly disagree with that. I think a good point is raised that perhaps this should only apply to tenants and not owners. I think if that is a better argument, but I still disagree with it. Owners on the park, as you can see, looking at the Presque Industrial Park, it is a discrete area, and a person who is an owner on the park will still have issues come up at the Presque Industrial Council level. And think of it this way. Think of it, you're part of a neighborhood, and a small neighborhood. I know it's a large amount of space, but it's not that big in terms of how we deal with things. And think about how you get to make all the decisions about how what your neighbor's tenancies are. You get to be the boss of the executive director who will have all the discussions with the tenants in the park. And you'll be able to set the policies for all the tenants in the park. And you will also have interactions as an owner with the Presque Industrial Council as well. And I think it goes to show again how that is an inherent conflict of interest for a tenant and an owner to be involved as a Presque Industrial Council director. These are the things that we're bringing to you that we think are necessary, and the language that you've provided, A, doesn't take it into account, and B, when it does, only applies it to directors at large. And in that, we believe it is very necessary ethically to meet the fiduciary duties that we have to this city, that you maintain what we have. I then have to take some exception to how it was developed. I agree with everyone here that nothing was done in haste about it. It was, again, a new situation arose where someone was seeking to be on the council, the city council, and expressed some interest in being in the industrial council. It had never come up before. No, in the prior 60 years, it hadn't come up. It was discussed at length. As you know, there are two directors there. Kevin, I believe, was part of our industrial council then. Mike Chassie, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin.
Randy Smith was.
Excuse me. Randy and Kevin, or Randy and Mike?
Randy and Kevin.
Okay, very well. So it was Randy and Kevin, two excellent directors for us, as was Mike. I don't want to leave him out. Very active, very participatory. How does our council work with our city councilors? Well, they have exactly the same vote we have, but we expect the city councilors to be the liaison to you. I don't come up here and speak to you very often. I come every year try to the annual meeting to show support for our executive directors. He gives his talk and to show support for that. But otherwise, we rely on Tom to be our public face of things. But with our city councilors, we expect them to be communicating with the city council to find out what will the city council like this idea. Is this something that we're going to have? Because we're handling city land. We're handling city affairs, and we need that active participation. But we have those two city councilors. We have whoever your city manager is. We've had Lewis at our meetings. He was invited to our meeting last week. I understand he was traveling. And we've even had Galen Weebly, and I don't know what his economic development people attend our meetings, and they're welcome to our meetings. You know what we don't have at our meetings? We don't have many private individuals speak to us. We make it a policy. People say, I'd like to speak to the board and give a pitch. We say, no thank you. Tom will receive that. We will take it under consideration, and then we will make a decision that's best, that we believe is best. And then obviously, when it comes to the larger decisions, this council has to approve it, has to decide to sell land, buy land, whatever it is that happens. And we've always respected that and respect it to this day. Nothing has changed in that capacity. What it is we're trying to do, though, is to operate this thing in a way that has served you for 60-some years. And what what is that? What is the success of it? It's out of politics. It's dealt with in a business-like fashion. It's dealt with in a way that I think shows great success for this city. Again, I'm not sure why this has to change. Nothing has changed in terms of, man, there's problems at the Industrial Council. We need to fix it. I'm sorry, but I disagree. What you have is working extremely well. Please keep it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Mr. Executive Director?
Yes, I'll thank the membership again for your time and allowing the PIIC members, the directors, to be able to speak. You will note that they did all make it here tonight, so I thought that was actually quite good of them to do so. No problem. And so, in conclusion with that, now that I've been pointed at the camera, is I would like to try to keep this position as neutral as possible, respecting both sides for what they are, realizing that I was brought on by the directors, and that is who I work for directly, but they also realize that we are nothing more than stewards of the city's holdings, and you as the council are those people that oversee those holdings. So I don't think there's any question involved by any of us of who actually has the final say in most of this. I think a lot of this has come up just because it surfaced because of unique situations, and I'd like to feel that those situations can be dealt with in a professional manner, and I think we have been doing exactly that, and I'd like to commend everybody for doing so. I don't know if I have very much more to add. I just hope that you see that our past actions just kind of prove out what our future would be.
Right?
Could you, you brought up something with the DEP and FAA.
Oh, wow. Well,
Can you address that?
when Craig was speaking a little bit earlier, he said that there are no encumbrances on any land that's sold or to anybody for any reason, and that's not entirely true, because with all our land sales or any dealings that we have with either a tenant or a leasee, the FAA, because of the proximity of all the land up there, has restrictions on the height of buildings and what can be built there and what can be done. So that verbiage is always added in, and there's also verbiage. We have a DEP permit for that entire park, so certain percentage of building can only occur, and it has to be done within the matrix, as it's called by the DEP, to conform to that. So we have to abide by, and even when we sell or lease, that verbiage is always in there.
Right.
So just to put like an example, if FW Webb had proposed a 5-story building,
It would have been denied.
it would have been denied because
Correct.
it wouldn't meet the FAA height.
You would have been past height restrictions, or if there'd been too much visible light for a landing. There's a lot of different encumbrances, but the FAA has a book that thick, so I wouldn't even dare to pretend to tell you all the things
Right.
they have.
But just to go back to that for a second.
Yes, sir.
My point with that wasn't that there wouldn't be encumbrances, because we have city codes that you'd have to deal with as well. And so that's my point is that if a owner of land on the park wants to put in a new bathroom or renovate or do whatever, they're going to do that through the code department here at City Hall.
And they're not beholding to us.
Right, and that was my point, is that there's not that connection. And of course, they're going to have to deal with the FAA and all of those things,
Right.
as anyone would, as they would with the code department. But
Good
but my
clarification.
point is that they wouldn't have to go back to you
No.
to say, okay,
Can we do
can we
this?
do this in our own building? Where a
You are
tenant
right.
or a leasee would say, geez, Tom, I want a new bathroom in our facility, or our roof is bad.
No.
They're going to have to absolutely come back to you, because you're the
We're
holder
ju-
of the lease.
we are just stewards
Right.
for the city, and
Right.
say, hey, is this in the city's
So,
best interest?
so just to kind of give
That's
a,
correct.
my point was that.
Understood, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
I would just close by saying I believe our actions have shown us to do exactly that for the past 60 years, and would hope that that would be recognized by all the members. With that, thank you.
Thank you. Don't go too far. You're in the membership game here, right? Again, remind everybody where we're at. We're on item 2 of this review of the Presque Industrial Council bylaws as they are right now. So if there are any other comments from City Council, we had a very nice presentation of opinions, which I am grateful that we had this evening, and thank you for everybody for attending tonight's meeting. Hank?
Mr. Chairman, I only have one, and it's under the section for executive director. They have a listing of all of the executive director's responsibilities, what he can do, what he can't do. They also have him serving as the clerk for the corporation. To me, under their 16.1 section for conflict of interest, that would almost be a natural conflict, because I can't see where it would be good practice to have the executive director sitting as a clerk for an entity that supervises him or tells him what to do.
So noted, but perhaps that'd be best for the discussion when we get to the amendment part there on section 3. So let's get back to that when we get to section 3. Jeff, anything you want to do as far as reviews go, comments wise? Just making sure everybody has a chance to speak.
No, I appreciate everybody from the membership and the council speaking. There's some things I don't disagree with, but
You're all set right now.
I'm all set right now.
Jim?
I said as well, yeah.
So I'll be the last voice on this particular part, and I have a
Craig.
I just,
no no after me.
Okay.
Okay, you had your chance.
Oh, no, I just
I'm
wanted
gonna
to-
get back to
I
you.
just didn't want to address the
I know.
folks that, okay, yeah.
I know what you want to do.
Okay, yeah.
You'll get it. This is going to come across very, very strange to you guys and stuff, because I really do not have any clairvoyance or crystal ball or anything like that. These comments were prepared almost 5 days ago by myself, and I think you're going to find that some of them are address some of the things that you said tonight. So allow me an opportunity to read this little thing that I prepared for tonight. The letter basically to the Presque Industrial Council Board of Directors regarding potential bylaw changes. For the past several decades, the work put in by the Presque Industrial Council, its executive director and staff of the Board of Directors has yielded successful economic development for the city of Presque. From business finding the site as a strategic point for all the county, to their access to infrastructure such as water and sewer, to police and fire protection, to the convenience of being adjacent to the air services offered by both passenger and freight delivery companies. All are pieces that are part of the puzzle here, and the fit has worked very well. The daily management of these pieces falls on the Presque Industrial Council executive staff and employees, with oversight from the Presque Industrial Council Board of Directors. Having served alongside those directors for the past 3 years, I can attest to the thoroughness and dedication of continuing to place the right pieces of the puzzle together on the industrial park. Deciding how these fit together for the best opportunity of the future is a challenging one. The Presque Industrial Council Board, comprised of the various appointments from the chamber reps, at-large reps, and the council reps, has outwardly given the sense of diversity on the board of directors. The discussion tonight is to allow the tradition of diversity to be applied to board members who are participating daily and investing in business on the industrial park. When I looked around the table at the then current directors, I found most of them were very similar to me. We had occupations mostly outside of the industrial park, and were trying to apply our life experiences to the group to aid the executive staff. While we were placed there from different organizations, we were all essentially cut from the same cloth. Not a lot of diversity going there. The Presque City Council currently has an elected individual who owns and operates a business on the park. This presents a very unique opportunity to ask this councilor to also be a board member of the Industrial Council. This opportunity is not likely to be repeated again due to the time commitments required to run for an elected office and to attend the city council matters, much less being voted on by his peers and elected to a 2-member board. A business owner on the park would inject diversity into this group of directors, and it is an opportunity that should be embraced by the Presque Industrial Council. This would be one voice, or could be up to 2 voices, in the future from the City Council on a board comprised of 7 members. Clearly, this does not constitute a majority takeover of the board of directors who, according to the bylaws, can appoint up to 3 at-large members. So, if they choose to, they can require those at-large members to not be the owners or tenants of the industrial park. This would follow the thought of what I've just mentioned in terms of majority on the board not being park owners. Before I close, I would reiterate that during my time on the board of directors, I witnessed many instances where 1 or more board members would excuse or recuse themselves from a discussion or a vote citing a conflict of interest. In fact, I did that myself on a few occasions. This conflict of interest scenario rarely comes into view over a year's worth of 12 monthly meetings. The changes in bylaw language today will help the framework for those situations as they come up and will help future board meetings conduct their affairs. Presque City Council will continue to support the excellent efforts of our boards and committees who work voluntarily to improve our city and the experience of our residents. That concludes my comments. Mr. Green,
Oh,
before we go to item 3.
Yep, I just had a couple, 3 things just because thank you all for all your thoughts and I enjoyed hearing those. I just kind of wanted to just kind of reiterate if there's any confusion on what I'd said. I just wanted to address what some of you had asked. So let me just do that for just 1 second and then I'll be done. The items, to kind of reiterate, Scott, your president, mentioned why the directors at large would have this language as opposed to the city council language. And again, I'll address the city council part in just a second, but that we knew that that was important for you folks to not have more opportunities for park owners or tenants to be on the board, and so we felt strongly in this language version that that be left that way, so that you could appoint people to your board, but you would not appoint people from the park, so that it wouldn't give the opportunity for more people to be on the board in that situation. The information and Ray's thing about the conflicts that could arise, and if a member of the council had an ownership interest in a piece of property there, why is that different than any other membership status on the board? And I guess again with that, there is a different status with the council members and being appointed to the board than with the general public and the at-large members or the chamber members, only because we are elected by the citizens to represent them. So we have a duty to the citizens first, beyond ourselves, and I think all of you take that very seriously in your time to represent the public above yourself. But yours is a ethical and a personal decision. Ours is an elected requirement that we do that. And so we, at the end of the day, will vote on all of the higher functions of your organization. So we're going to vote on the land transactions, the budget, the financial matters, and anything that's of any great substance that rises beyond the level of what the board's empowered to do. This council will do that. So regardless of the members of the council, if they happen to 5 of them be owners on the park, or 1 of them, or none of them, we have a duty to the citizens to make those best decisions. So to preclude them from a membership on a board that we're in direct control of, when at the end of the day we are financially and morally and ethically and empowered by the citizens to actually make the final decision for the organization, it just seems at odds that you know, we're allowed to do things at this high level, but we're going to be precluded from doing things at the board level that we manage. So I guess those are 2 things that I just really wanted to make a better point of. And again, I appreciate completely, Frank, been friends since high school, known each other for a long time, and I appreciate your point of view, and I understand that. And I guess, you know, we have a healthy agree to disagree on some things, and certainly don't want it to seem any more than that. And I'd also like to personally apologize to you for the last meeting and when I did break into your conversation. That was unprofessional, and I do apologize for that. The other thing is just to make a point, Frank, with yours about a person from the park in the instance of being an owner, now having to have the chance to vote on park policy that might encompass their neighbors, or give some, maybe it's a personal disagreement, or maybe it's something that you just don't like your neighbors, and now you're going to have a chance to vote on something, and I can see where you may have some thoughts about that. But again, those items in dealing with the city council, those people are one of 7 here, and would be on your board no different. That's something that, again, the language that I think that I was very pleased to see everyone agree on is the conflict of interest language, which says, we have a duty to disclose any of those things. If you folks felt that there was that kind of dilemma that would go on, then you can force the issue as well to have the person recuse themselves from the issue. So again, I don't think there's any kind of chance of a majority issue where that would come up, because at the end of the day, whether I'm here as one of 7 or if I sit on your board as one of 7, I got to have 4 votes to actually have it change. So if you guys aren't impressed with it, it's not going to happen anyway, because ultimately the majority is going to rule. And so I don't think things of that nature that are vendetta or something of that sort would occur, because that's not any of your mindset, and I don't think that would ever float. So those are just some things just to kind of clarify maybe what my thoughts were about those things, just to put a period on it.
Thank you, Counselor. I think we'd like to go to,
Frank would like to say something.
why don't we reserve that comment, Frank, until we get to the amendment part? Would you mind? You certainly will. You're welcome. So if there is no other comments from council, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is the amendments to the Presque Industrial Council bylaws as proposed. And I'm going to invite our city solicitor to address us a bit and guide us as to which documents that we have at this point. So Mr. Courier will discuss what options we have and where maybe the genesis of what we have in front of us and how it started and where we're at.
How it started was an email from Ruth Kern, the assistant administrator, on December 16, 2021, saying that the board had directed her to propose or draft some language to deal with potential conflict of interest. There had been an election in November. The council directors met. There was some language proposed by Attorney Bemis, and I literally took that language and incorporated it into some handwritten notes on the back of the page and sent it back to her to address this potential because we had a meeting coming up in January, a couple weeks later. And it was vague and broad, but the idea was to generate some sort of bylaw that would address the situation. At their January meeting, the council, city council, of course, does all their appointments, and then they have their annual meeting of the industrial council, so it's a very busy night, as it was this year. And so the bylaw was passed on the recommendation of the directors of the industrial council, and that was the bylaw for 2 years. So fast forward to January of this year, and the city council appointed one of its members who is an owner in the park to be a member of the board of directors. and appointed a second director who is a shareholder in a company that is a tenant. And so that generated some discussion between the directors of the Industrial Council and the City Council. And I participated in that discussion, and I agreed with the chairman of the Industrial Council that this posed a potential lack of eligibility of these two city councilors. So that in turn generated a great deal of discussion through personal interaction, emails. We perceived that the directors of the council were concerned about conflicts of interest. And so we created a conflict of interest policy that has now been incorporated as section 16 of the proposed bylaw changes. And we also developed a separate document that is referred to as the Code of Ethics and Conduct Policy, which is almost verbatim the same Code of Ethics and Conduct Policy of the Presque City Council. That's where we borrowed it from. And that also is incorporated into the proposed bylaw changes. So the hope was, or the goal was, to take into account the perception from the directors that the potential for a conflict of interest, to develop a bylaw to address it, and to develop a code of conduct that would further illuminate what was expected of directors. While we were at it, we took a deeper dive into the bylaws themselves. The Presque Industrial Council is a Maine nonprofit corporation. It was incorporated in 1961 when the federal government sold the former Presque Air Force Base to the city of Presque for $1. And the city said, what are we going to do with this thing? And so they formed a corporation made up of some local businessmen and probably politicians, members of city council, that kind of thing, to manage this asset. And they've done an excellent job over the decades of managing that asset. And we've certainly seen the benefit to the city from their efforts. In looking at the bylaws, I realized that the corporation has a clerk, and he files the annual report every year for the corporation, but the bylaws didn't identify what his duties were or who he was. And so we incorporated into that a term for the clerk. I want to address that because Hank had raised a question about it. Under Maine law, a clerk is a person who must be a resident of the state of Maine and is designated by the corporation as the person with whom the Secretary of State communicates and the person designated by law to receive service of process or any official communications on behalf of the company or the corporation. For a limited liability company, that same task is undertaken by what is called a registered agent. And I happen to be a clerk and a registered agent of hundreds of corporations and LLCs, all mom and pop operations from around the county. I know Frank is, Derek is. So, I mean, it's just an official position. But the bylaws never had any mention of who the clerk was. So Larry Clark for many years was the clerk, and then Tom Powers. So all they do is file the annual report for the nonprofit identifying who the directors are. So we included that. We cleaned up some language, grammar, that kind of thing. And then we dealt with the duties of the directors and their eligibility. The key provision is the one that you see under section 9. And it's gone through various drafts. The final version reads, no at-large director shall be an owner or lessee of property located within the Skyway Industrial Park, or a shareholder, member, officer, or director of a closely held corporation, business, or other economic entity which is an owner of property located within the Skyway Industrial Park. This restriction shall not apply to ownership in mutual funds, retirement funds, or the holding of publicly traded stocks. This restriction shall not apply to license to use space agreements. And then there's a definition of what the park is. Now, that language was proposed by the directors, but they proposed that it applied to all directors. And the council had indicated to me that that language should apply only to at-large directors. And so that's how the final draft was presented. We also incorporated as section 16 the conflict of interest provisions, which I think are significant. And of course, it adopts the Code of Ethics and Conduct Policy. So my understanding is the last draft that you're working with is the one I sent in both red line and clean copy on February 2, after we had received Scott's email and proposals, or proposed language from the directors, which we've tried to incorporate as much of that as we could, and still maintain that distinction as you've indicated.
So, just to clarify, we've got a couple of handouts in front of us. So I handed out two versions. One was January 26th, that was Plan A. Just calling it Plan A because it was done on the 26th of January. And then on February 2nd, what he is addressing right now is Plan B. Is there any questions of which document you're actually looking at? Does everybody know?
It would be
We're
the
only-
draft of February 2, I think, that.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so, that's what you just handed out in clean version tonight.
Correct.
And then since it was the second one, we're calling it B, just
Okay.
A and B.
All right, thank
Not,
you.
not to say that one's favored over the other, it's just, it's a B, so. I think what's in front of us right now is the proposed amendments as, Counselor has shown us with the proposed changes addressing our concerns and the concerns of the directors of the industrial council. You had a question, was it addressed?
Yeah.
Any other at this point? No? Mr. Bemis, would you like to
I'll keep it brief.
have an opportunity to speak?
Yes, I think you don't like me moving that.
Well, it takes it out of view of the camera.
All right.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. We can move the camera.
I hope you will also have before you the language that we proposed for you. Do you? You do. All right. And few comments. I think, Mr. Curry, would you agree that it's a policy decision as to whether it applies to at-large directors or directors, all directors? Is that correct? It's not a legal distinction that you're worried about. All right. And so, it is a policy decision for this council. You have the power to make it apply to only some of your directors on the industrial council. Doesn't mean you should, and I hope I've made the case that just because you have the power to do that, that you simply should. And I guess the last point I'll make is how I agree that one person on the Presque Industrial Council would never make a majority. It's 1 out of 7. But you have to understand how the Presque Industrial Council works. We have very limited number of employees. Again, traditionally, we have not done much field work. I don't go inspect buildings. I don't speak to tenants. Again, I doubt the tenants know I'm there. It's, in this case, Tom Powers, that is the one, with an assistant, Ruth Doherty. Very able, we're very happy with them. However, any one of us directors would have quite a bit of power over those employees. Tom tends to pick up the phone when I call. I am a director of the entity. I vote every year on both whether he's retained, what his salary is, etc. That one director will have an awful lot of pull with those employees. And if there happens to be disagreements over prior dealings, again, Mr. Nelson, who I will speak, Gary, if I may, has been a prior tenant. He's had substantial dealings with both Larry Clark and Tom Powers. He's had substantial dealings with us as council. His business is a hugely successful business within the council, to which is credit to him. All the more power and continued success. But it creates the inherent conflict of interest that we seem to, I wish to bring up, and I do believe makes it most desirable that you consider and approve the language that we've suggested as to what the new Section 9, the former Section 8, that applies to all directors on the city council, on the Presque Industrial Council. Thank you again.
Hey Frank, can I ask you a question?
You may.
Can you ask Tom what his take is for me being a director? What his opinion is?
So
Does
you're
he
putting,
think it's a good idea or a bad idea?
I'll do whatever I'm told.
here, see,
Well, I just wanted to throw that out there because he told me to have 3 or 4 times that he definitely thut it was a good idea that I was on the council, on a director,
did you ask him
on the
whether
industrial
he
council.
felt it would be a conflict of interest?
No, I didn't ask him that because he just said he wished I was on the council.
You would bring a lot of information as an owner, a tenant. I mean, you're on the agenda Thursday. Did you know that?
Perfect.
No, you're seriously. Your properties are on the agenda for the Presque Industrial Council Thursday.
Okay.
Um,
For what reason?
well, again,
Okay, guys, we're not gonna go back and forth here,
We're
and
not-
we need to be
but this-
germane,
this
we need
points
to be
out, Kevin,
germane to the
well, I'm being
topic
cut
at
off
hand.
once again as I demonstrate to you the conflicts of interest that are here, and just in the last 2 weeks, Gary, I understand you went to the Presque Industrial Council to find out what my status is on the little motorcycle that I rent over there. Is that right?
Well, I did ask if you were a tenant on the park. Absolutely. Yes, I
Where's
did.
my office, Gary?
Academy Street, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Academy Street.
Where's my office, Frank?
Well, I know where your business is.
Yeah. Have you
I-
ever been there?
You know, I've not been inside, no.
Case closed.
So you go to investigate me.
No, I just asked a simple question. If you were a
It was
tenant.
a very simple question. I'm not a tenant. You could have asked me.
So if you want to talk about conflicts of interest, Frank, I mean
Yes, sir.
now, so why are we changing the verbiage in the bylaws now? Because you guys do have conflicts of interest and you're not operating within your bylaws and you haven't in the last 2 years, Frank. Did you know that?
I disagree with you.
Well, that's
entirely.
100%.
What you're
So
what
why
you're
did
saying
we-
is
why
that
did we
my
add this-
401k.
Why
It's
did
enough.
we add this
Is
new
that
verbiage?
correct?
Then I'm gonna gavel
Sure.
that down, guys, cease, this is not productive part of the meeting, and what we need to get back to is that we're not
I-
creating, we're
I'd
not
like to
creating
point
a
out-
bylaw for a person, we're creating a bylaw for a file that could be either now or in the future, rarely probably in the future, that we'll have this circumstance. But we're trying to create the file, not to fit the individual.
This change is being brought about for this individual. That's why it's being done. I don't know what agreements were made in advance of the vote for an ineligible person to be on our board, but he was put on. And I believe he's put pressure just this week on Mr. Powers about issues regarding this. And I hope it doesn't continue, but these are the issues why there's a conflict. It's the specific issues, there's the inherent problems, but if you wanna get into specifics, we can get into specifics. Thank you again for your time.
You're welcome, sir. Getting back to the amendment in front of us on Plan B, as shown, is there any other comments about any particular part of this plan that anybody has?
So in regards to all of the changes that were mocked up by council, by Rick, okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Most everything I think, makes sense in far as what I can see. But I'll reiterate the language in regards to the city council as opposed to other members, that at the end of the day, whether or not one of us sits on the board of the Presque Industrial Council or whether we don't, we're still going to be the entity that will finalize your documents, finalize your transactions, finalize your budget, and vote on all of those things. So nothing about this, whether this bylaw is there or not there, is going to change how we're empowered to make the final decision on what your board does. Your board is going to do the day-to-day operations and do all of those things that you've done so wonderfully and make the agreements. But at the end of the day, all of the major decisions of your board are going to come back here to our group, where there is no delineation between any of us on who's empowered to vote on those decisions or not. And just to give a good example of those potential conflicts that you've mentioned, during my tenure, I've been on the council now going on 12 years. Over that course of time, Gary, before he was a member of the board and since he's been a member of the board, has had financial transactions with your organization. We all know that, and because of that, we have 2 buildings purchased, we have millions of dollars in equipment, and we have over 50 jobs that are in Presque. So I think that's a win for everybody. But in both of those instances that dealt with him personally, when we made those final decisions, just as we would expect on your board, he recused himself from our board and wasn't present at the meeting, nor was he present in the room, or had any dealing with us at that point in time. And we were presented those documents from the executive directors at the time, and they came to us and said, here's what the deal is, here's what our board thinks ought to happen, and frankly, we took your recommendation verbatim, and that's what we made for the deal, for the purchase and sale of those items. So nothing is going to change about any of those types of dealings with this gentleman or anyone else that may be a park owner, tenant, or otherwise. That's still going to be the case of what we're elected to do and to manage. So, you know, I do think that that is the big picture. The big picture is that we're going to be in that role, which is the executive function of all of this, no matter what we do. And so to quibble about whether or not one person out of 7 on the subsidiary board is not empowered to be there as a representative of this board, which is the managing board of that organization, frankly doesn't just make sense to me. And so and if there is a conflict, that's what all this language is for. And the expectation of ethics, the expectation of recusal, and the expectation of holding the organization first and the personal agenda second is our expectation on this board for all of our members, and nor would it be any different on your board. So that's, I guess, all I would say.
I want to take a moment to read the Article 16 conflict of interest as written, and that's on page 5 of Plan B. Section 16(1), avoidance of conflict or the appearance of such conflict. Each director shall endeavor to avoid conflicts of interest or the appearance of such conflicts or impropriety as provided by state statute, by full disclosure at all times and by abstention in the appropriate circumstances. 16.2, disclosure. Any director who has a direct interest in the matter to be considered by the board shall fully disclose that interest to the board. If a director is unsure whether a direct interest exists in a particular matter or if the issue is otherwise raised in good faith, the director shall disclose the pertinent facts to the board, and the board shall determine the issue. Abstention. 16.3. When the director has so disclosed and is deemed to have a direct interest in this matter, a director shall abstain from voting on the matter and from otherwise participating in the decision-making process on the matter. Notation of the disclosure and abstention of the director shall be recorded in the minutes. 16.4, direct interest. For the purpose of this article, direct interest in a matter shall mean a substantial financial interest of the director of the spouse or dependent child of the director, a substantial financial interest of any employer, partner, associate, co-shareholder, or other co-adventure of the director, a substantial financial interest of the director in any entity which has a substantial financial interest in the matter, or any other substantial interest of the director which the director of the board believes might reasonably impair the director's ability to act independently. And the final 16.5 section is the Code of Ethics and Conduct Policy. All directors shall abide by the Presque Industrial Council Code of Ethics and Conduct Policy, which I believe this was lifted from another board, pretty much word for word. All right. Is there any other comments as far as this plan? Is there a motion on the floor?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we adopt the language that was presented by Rick Courier, counsel to the city.
It's moved by Craig. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jeff. Any other comments on the motion? Lewis and Tom, you guys are invited now to be part of the vote.
Add in, yes.
Yep.
I'll just make one comment on the process. I don't believe that the Presque Industrial Council Board of Directors has issues, especially with this added article on the end of the Code of Conduct. It's just been almost taken for granted for years, and to have in writing is no problem at all. The section I would say I would have the biggest hiccup with is I'll call it singling out of the directors at large as having parameters placed upon them that the other 4 directors do not, the 2 from the chamber and the 2 from the council. If fair is fair and we're dealing with codes of conduct or visibility or what the general public may assume, I think we have to assume that all directors are equal in all instances. That would be my catch on this.
Tom, you're referring to page 3 at the bottom.
I believe you are right, sir.
No direct, let me have the opportunity to read that. No at-large director shall be an owner or leasee of the property located within Skyway Industrial Park or a shareholder, member, officer, or director of a closely held corporation, business, or other economic entity which is an owner of the property located within the Skyway Industrial Park. This restriction shall not apply to ownership in mutual funds, retirement funds, or the holding of publicly traded stock. This restriction shall not apply to license to use space agreements.
My point to that was it singles out no director at large. And that is a distinction that is different from the 2 directors from the council and the 2 directors from the Chamber of Commerce.
So the reason why that was placed in there was so that you didn't have leasees coming to you saying, I'd like to be eligible to be on your board.
Understood, but it doesn't have that same commitment to the 2 chamber positions or the 2 council positions.
So okay, so again, I think it's been talked about a few times, but we'll try it one more time, that we're elected by 5,500 people to serve for a 4-year period, and that we can be on most any board and committee. And what you are doing is you're appointing people or recommending that appointment to the city council. Okay, so we were just looking out for your interest, that you could simply say to a tenant, if you want to be on the industrial council, basically you got to run for city council first. Or join the chamber. That's correct.
Clarification, Mr. Chairman?
Well,
The directors at large are nominated by the 2 city council directors and the 2 chamber directors. They're not nominated by the Presque Industrial Council Board of Directors.
Don't you recommend those nominees to us?
They're nominated by those 4 directors. That's who nominates them. We don't nominate them.
I mean, we can strike this language, guys, but we were trying to not have the opportunity to have, let's say there was 2 park owners here and the 3 other people came from you. You could then have a majority position on your board of 7 where they would be owners or leasees in the park.
You still can with your draft language, with this language that you're voting on. There'd be 2 from the city council, potentially, and 2 from the chamber. It'd be a majority of those people. Tom is saying, why have the distinction? Why not apply it to all directors? That's what our proposed language does. It makes it apply to every single director. You folks are elected to be city councilors, not industrial council directors.
And my point is that the directors of the industrial council do not nominate directors.
I thought that was kind of how it worked, though.
The city council nominates 2 members from the city council to be elected by the membership of the industrial council.
That's what we're talking about tonight.
Yep, and the Chamber of Commerce nominates 2 members to be elected by the membership of the industrial council. And those 4 members nominate the directors at large, not the industrial council directors. Yeah, at large. Yeah. So that's my point.
And I'll have to side with what Frank clarified, is that why is there any distinction for any director on our board? Why is one different than another?
So, Rick, would you like to address the potential striking of the no at-large director sentence, basically?
Well, the question is, does it remain no at-large director, or do you strike the entire provision? Now, what is being proposed by the directors is that would apply to all directors, including those from the city council and the chamber,
And at large.
as well as the at-large members. But that provision was placed in there at the direction of the members of the city council to apply to at-large directors. I mean, this provision is the nut of what we're dealing with, and have been now for a month.
I don't understand how an elected city councilor wouldn't have the benefit of having the privilege of being able to serve on the industrial council board
Yep.
without any disqualifying elements. It just strikes me as strange. Sorry.
The only potential conflict I see is the amount of nuances that could appear from a landowner owning land and being part of the council. As they said, he's already on the agenda next week. I think for the cohesion of their board or their council, these sort of things can definitely pose as conflicts of interest. That's all I really got to say on the matter.
And one more thing, if I could, I just think it's also a shame that it's gotten to this point. In the months that you guys spent in 2021 talking about this and whatnot, and yes, it's a shame that we skipped it, or we missed it when we voted to approve the bylaw change. It just, the lack of counsel there regarding this bylaw change, or working or walking through any potential scenarios that may have come up like they did in January when we made our appointments. We were completely, I don't know about the rest of the guys, but I was completely blindsided by it. I just think it was, I don't know, just, it's unfortunate. I don't like how it went down.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick point too, is you know, when I think about this whole thing, I mean, you know, it makes no sense to me that because I own a piece of property up on the industrial park, but we own our property, we have nothing to do with the industrial park itself, that I could not serve on the Presque Industrial Council board. But if my business was down at the end of Skyway, down by a Rooster Cast, or down on State Street, the State Road, I'd be eligible. Well, that makes no sense to me whatsoever. I mean, I'm not the smartest guy, but I'm surely not the dumbest guy either, and that just makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever.
The motion was by Craig and seconded by Jeff. Is there any other comments? Is there any other proposed amendments that you want to change, or do you want to vote this as written? And that's what your proposal was, right? Your motion was to accept as written.
Accept this as written, but if there's a desire to have the chamber members have the same restriction that the directors at large will
Well,
have.
I'm guessing is they want them all or nothing.
Right.
They don't like this, and because it divides them up. So I'm making an assumption that that wouldn't be acceptable either. Is that correct?
So they're allowed the privilege of operating in privacy and out of the public eye, but an elected official isn't privileged to sit in on it? Is that what, is that in a nutshell?
No. They want to apply the
Hold on, it's important. We have 7 directors.
Yes.
2 of them are city councilors.
Yes.
They are full directors, have full privileges that every other director. In fact, they have a few more because they have some nominating powers that we don't have. And they get to vote with you, and like us, they are part of a private this is a private non-profit corporation. And everything done is out with those 2 councilors is outside the purview of the public. So they have the same rights and privileges. The question is, should someone with a conflict of interest be cleansed because they've been through the city council election process? Does that mean that their conflict does not carry through to the Presque Industrial Council? I suggest, of course, it continues through that. It's not cleaned away because of that.
Doesn't what is proposed here in Article 16 address all of that?
Conflicts of interest?
If someone, so that person, if they do have an inherent conflict of interest, they in essence will need to not vote on any matter. I don't think if Mr. Nelson submitted that Gary, has submitted that this is affecting only one man. If that's your view, he shouldn't vote on this matter. There'll be too many conflicts out there, and really shouldn't be a part of the Presque Industrial Council. That's the whole thing. It's the inherent part of it. Constantly be battling this issue. For me, I'm an attorney in town. I represent certain people, and it's quite obvious to me when I have a conflict and when I don't, because so-and-so's name comes up. And it's pretty clear. I make the announcement and do what I have to do. Here, you're constantly putting one person in a position where they have to constantly evaluate their inherent conflicts. That's the whole reason it was brought up years ago. It's the whole reason why it should remain, the spirit of it should remain, and you should remove the at-large portion of what's been suggested to you and leave it as all directors.
So if I'm understanding everything correctly, you're okay with proposed amendments and things that Attorney Currier had made. You just want to put that provision that you stated while you were at the podium into what it is that's being quoted, which was the no director shall be an owner or leasee of property located within the Skyway Industrial Park.
Yeah, we have no issues with all the other language. We've been basically following that. No issue at all. It's just we want to avoid someone becoming a director who has an inherent conflict. And we believe that owners and tenants on the park have that. That's our position. And if you, I'd recommend, Tom, that you move to amend it to strike at large and leave everything as it is.
That would be my.
See the power I have?
Thanks for the verbiage. Yeah,
Scott?
It's
Just
the distinction.
to say that only directors at large could have a conflict of interest is wrong, in my opinion. That's what the bottom line is. So other people, whether it be a city council, whether it be a chamber of commerce, could have a conflict of interest as well, not just the director of finance.
only, the provision where it sorts out the directors at large of having additional fiduciary responsibilities in this. And I think he actually said it quite well when he said, just because an elected official or a chamber official is put onto the board doesn't mean they're cleansed and will be of any dealing that we may have. The verbiage was put in a couple years ago just to make sure that this exact discussion actually never came up, and we put anybody in the middle of the conflict, and it's just very strange that we placed ourselves there.
Tom, are you making a motion?
I would make a motion that we accept the verbiage as written by Attorney Courier, except for the portion where it directs directors at large, and all directors are the same.
Page 3, page 3 of 6,
Take out at large.
the words, 2 words, at large would be struck.
Correct. That would be my motion.
That would be the motion on the floor. So it would read, no director shall be an owner or leasee of property located within the industrial park, et cetera, et cetera. Is there a second on that motion?
I second that.
It's been moved by Tom and seconded by Jim. Is there any comments on the motion? Before we move to a vote, if you vote yes, you're changing it from no at-large director to no director shall be an owner or leasee of the property located within the industrial park. Is that your intent of the motion, sir? Do you understand that is what you seconded, sir?
I do.
All right. Is there any other
There'd be
comments?
no property owners that would be allowed on the industrial council.
Basically, that would be the same as it's written right now. All right? So if you vote yes, you're voting for a change here. If you vote no, you're voting for no change, and it's going to be as written. Tom, Lewis, you guys have a vote in this. So,
Where I made the motion, it would be obvious that my vote would be I'd like to have those 2 words struck.
all right. So we got a Y. And I'll start to my right. Would you vote yes or no?
I'll vote yes.
So it's going to be to keep the language so that no director shall be an owner of the park.
Correct.
Jim?
I vote to keep the language or to change that, to take out at large.
Jeff?
No.
Craig?
No.
Gary?
No.
Lewis?
Gotta go with the council, no.
I vote no. The motion fails. Back to the original motion on the floor to adopt the bylaws as written. Motion by Craig, seconded by Jeff. Is there any other comments?
We're voting on Plan A.
This would be Plan B essentially as written and with the inclusion of no at-large director shall be an owner or leasee. Any other comments?
So would you read that section one more time?
Which section?
The,
The contentious one?
yes.
On page 3, the bottom paragraph, no at-large director shall be an owner or leasee of property located within the Skyway Industrial Park or shareholder, member, officer, or director of a closely held corporation, business, or other economic entity which is an owner of property located within the Skyway Industrial Park. This restriction shall not apply to ownership in mutual funds, retirement funds, or the holding of publicly traded stock. This shall not apply to license to use space agreements. Is that what you asked?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any other comments? All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? 2. Tom? Opposed? Lewis? You are voting yes?
We going to just write down the line again.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and can you clarify which way means which?
We're adopting the bylaws as written and proposed on February 2nd by Mr. Courier and vetted by members of the Board of Directors and the membership of the Presque Industrial Council. The membership, yeah, which is us. Hank?
No.
No.
Jeff,
Yes.
Craig,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
Louis,
I wish there was a better solution, but I gotta go with yes with the council.
Tom. Kevin's yes. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 5 to 3 in favor of the adoption of the bylaws as shown from the February 2nd that we have in front of us.
See you guys Thursday.
There is a matter first that we have removed your name from contention, and we have to deal with that at a council meeting now, so. He's never been removed from this membership. He never was removed from this membership. This membership is not met.
The city council nominates, and the industrial council membership elects. So it's the membership that elects, not the city council.
And they
We did that before on January 4th.
But you removed him at the last meeting?
The council removed him, but the membership did not remove him. We haven't met since January 4th as a membership. But the council did remove him at the last meeting. And they'll probably, now we'll have a consideration whether he should be on there at tomorrow night's meeting. And that's on our agenda. Is there any other business before us this evening for membership? Seeing none, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
So moved by Craig, seconded by Jim. All those in favor? Opposed? Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.